All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We love to dig into the latest research, and today we're going to be looking at something that one of you sent in a paper titled "Towards Understanding Distilled Reasoning Models: A Representational Approach."
Ooh, sounds pretty complex.
Yeah, I know, right? It does sound a little intimidating.
It does.
But stick with us because this one's for our learner persona, and today we're going to try to break it down.
Yeah.
And really get to the bottom of how researchers are trying to take the knowledge of those giant AI models that we hear so much about and pack it into smaller, more manageable ones,
Right.
and what that means for the model's ability to reason.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is I think a fascinating area of research because we're essentially trying to figure out
Yeah,
if we can create a smaller AI that can think just as well as the massive supercomputer-sized models, but
exactly.
also we're trying to look inside to see how this process of knowledge compression changes the way the AI thinks.
Yeah, so maybe before we get too far into it, let's just take a step back and explain what exactly is model distillation.
Right.
Because, I mean, it sounds a bit like, I don't know, AI moonshine.
That's actually a great way to put it. It's essentially like you have a brilliant professor who's like the teacher model,
Right.
and they're teaching everything they know to an eater student,
Yeah.
the student model,
Right.
and the goal is for the student to learn as much as possible
Yeah.
while being much smaller and more efficient.
Right. Okay.
So you can almost imagine having like a huge library, right? And
Yeah.
and condensing all of that knowledge into a single portable book.
So we're not only talking about making AI smart,
Yeah,
but also making it more accessible. So
exactly.
you can, actually run it on devices that everyone has instead of needing some giant.
Exactly. That's one of the biggest motivations behind this research is trying to, yeah.
Make AI more widely available and applicable. Right, right. But here's the big question. Can a smaller AI really think as well as its giant counterpart?
Yeah, so how did the researchers go about answering that question? Like, did they give it some kind of, I don't know, AI pop quiz?
Not exactly a pop quiz, but they did do something quite ingenious. Okay,
They wanted to see how the internal workings of these distilled models compared to the originals.
right.
And to do that, they used a technique called a sparse crosscoder.
Sparse crosscoder. Okay, I'm already feeling a little lost, so maybe
Sure.
break that down in a way that even I can understand.
Okay, so think of it as a special kind of X-ray that lets you look inside the AI's brain
Okay,
and compare the patterns of activity between the original teacher model and the distilled student model.
right.
So you can identify which features are shared between the two, and more importantly, which features are unique to the distilled model.
So we're not just shrinking the AI,
Yeah.
but we're actually looking at how the distillation process changes the way it, I guess,
Yeah,
thinks.
you got it.
Okay, all right, so that makes sense.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay,
The researchers in this paper focused on 4 specific categories of reasoning.
4 different ways of thinking.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm all ears.
so there's self-reflection, deductive reasoning,
Uh-huh.
alternative reasoning, and contrastive reasoning.
Okay, break it down for me.
Okay, so imagine the AI is working on a problem.
Yeah,
Self-reflection is like when it can catch its own mistakes.
right.
Almost like saying, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right.
Uh-huh.
And then deductive reasoning is about like drawing logical conclusions.
Right.
It's like saying, therefore, based on these facts, this must be true.
Yeah, okay.
And then alternative reasoning is about exploring different approaches, like saying, on the other hand, we could try this.
Uh-huh. So it's like weighing the options.
Exactly.
Okay.
And finally, contrastive reasoning is about comparing and contrasting ideas.
Okay.
Like saying, however, this approach has these drawbacks
Right.
compared to that one.
Okay, yeah. So I'm starting to see how all these different reasoning styles
Yeah,
could be important for an AI to solve problems effectively.
right.
But how did they actually connect these reasoning categories to what's happening inside those distilled models?
Right. So what they did was they looked at which features in the sparse crosscoder lit up when the AI was exhibiting each of those reasoning behaviors.
Right.
For example, certain features would activate strongly whenever the AI used words like wait,
Yeah.
suggesting those features were associated with self-reflection,
Okay.
or that would use words like however, and those would be associated with contrastive reasoning.
So they were actually able to map specific features to different types of AI thinking.
That's exactly right.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
What did they find? Did the smaller models still show those abilities?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They found that these distilled models, the smaller, more efficient ones,
Yeah.
they actually developed their own unique features
Oh,
related to each of the 4 reasoning types, features that weren't present in the original larger models.
hold on. So you're telling me that shrinking the AI didn't just make it smaller, it actually changed the way it thinks?
That's exactly right.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so it doesn't just compress the model, it actually reshapes the internal representations
Right.
and leads to the emergence of these unique reasoning features.
So it's almost like
Yeah.
it, it's developing its own kind of unique
Yeah. It's
style.
like its own way of thinking about the world.
That's wild.
It is.
But how can we be sure that those features are actually related to reasoning and not just random quirks of the smaller model?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So to rule that out, the researchers did what are called ablation experiments,
Okay.
and they removed those unique features from the distilled model
Right.
to see if it affected its reasoning abilities.
So they're basically like AI brain surgeons. Just
Exactly.
like snipping things out to see what happens.
Exact.
All right. So what happened?
The results were pretty amazing.
Okay.
So when they removed features associated with, say, self-reflection,
Uh-huh.
the distilled model's ability to catch its own errors and use words like wait significantly decreased.
Okay.
So it strongly suggests that those features were playing a causal role.
So this isn't just like a correlation.
Right.
These things are actually driving the AI's ability to think in different ways.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Did they just find like a couple of these, or was it like a whole new landscape of thinking?
So they found that while many features were shared between the original and the distilled models, there were these clusters of features that were unique to each model.
Yeah.
And what they found was that the larger the distilled model,
Yeah.
the more of these unique features it seemed to develop.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So the bigger the student AI,
Yeah.
the more its own unique way of thinking develops.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, like, if these features are so unique
Yeah.
to each model,
Right.
how can we even compare them? Like, how do we know which ones are more important or more influential?
Right. So to quantify the prominence of these features in each model, they developed these metrics called the relative decoder norm, RDN, and the normalized relative norms, NRN.
Oh boy, I was afraid you were going to go there.
Yeah.
But maybe without getting into the equations, could you just explain what those things actually tell us?
Sure. So you can think of the NRN like a measure of how unique a feature is to a particular model.
Okay.
So a high NRN means that feature is much more prominent in the distilled model compared to the original.
Right. So it's like identifying its like signature way of thinking.
Exactly.
Okay. So did they find a lot of those or just a few?
So they found that while most features were shared between the teacher and student model,
Yeah.
there were these distinct outliers in the distribution
Uh-huh.
representing features that were much more prominent in the distilled model.
So it's like it develops some kind of hidden talents.
Yeah.
This is getting more and more intriguing. But like, if we can identify those unique reasoning features, can we actually control them? Like, could we make the AI more self-reflective or more decisive?
That's a question that
Yeah.
takes this research to the next level, and it's a really exciting one.
Okay.
But before we get into that, I think it's really important to stop and think about what all of this means.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that distilling these large AI models isn't just about making them smaller, it's actually changing the way they think.
Yeah.
These smaller AIs are developing their own unique reasoning styles,
It's like they're developing their own personalities.
almost as if they're developing their own personalities.
Yeah, I can't wait to find out what happens when we start trying to steer those personalities in different directions.
It's almost as if they're developing their own personalities. And what's even more fascinating is that the researchers didn't just observe these unique features.
Yeah.
They actually tried to control them.
Oh,
They wanted to see if they could steer the AI's reasoning by manipulating those features directly.
okay, hold on. They were actually able to like influence how the AI thinks just by like tweaking those internal features.
Yeah.
That sounds like something straight out of science
It
fiction.
does, doesn't it?
It does.
So they used a technique called activation elision,
Okay.
which is essentially like turning up the volume on specific features in the AI's brain
Right.
to see how it affects its behavior.
Okay.
So imagine being able to like nudge the AI towards a specific way of thinking just by adjusting these internal knobs.
So they're like AI puppeteers,
Exactly.
just kind of pulling on strings to make the AI dance. So what happened when they tried this?
Well, the results were remarkable.
Okay.
For example, when they activated the features associated with self-reflection,
Uh-huh.
the distilled model became incredibly hesitant and verbose.
Really?
It would start second-guessing itself constantly, exploring multiple interpretations of a problem,
Oh, wow.
generating these much longer and more convoluted responses.
So it's like they gave the AI like a really bad case of overthinking.
Exactly.
That's kind of hilarious and also a little unsettling.
Yeah, yeah.
Did they try doing it in any other directions?
They did, yeah.
Okay.
They also experimented with activating features associated with deductive reasoning.
Right.
And in this case, the AI became incredibly focused and efficient in its problem solving.
Okay.
It would zero in on the most relevant information, apply logical deductions really swiftly,
Right.
and arrive at the solution with remarkable clarity and confidence.
So they were able to make it a more decisive and logical thinker.
Hey,
That's pretty amazing.
it is.
So it's like they were able to fine-tune its like personality to be more suitable for certain tasks.
Exactly.
That's incredible. This is really making me rethink like what AI is even capable of.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about like brute force computation anymore.
Right.
It's about like understanding and manipulating these kind of nuanced ways that AI systems represent and process information.
That's a great point, and it highlights a growing area of research called AI interpretability,
Right.
which is all about understanding how AI models actually arrive at their conclusions.
Right, right.
And the more we understand the inner workings of these models, the better we'll be able to control their behavior and ensure that they're aligned with our values and goals.
Okay, that makes sense. We need to make sure that we're not just creating powerful AI,
Right.
but we're creating trustworthy AI.
Exactly.
Okay, well, before we get too far into like the ethics of all of this,
Yeah.
let's go back to the research itself.
Sure.
So we talked about these unique features and how they can be steered.
But
But what about like the overall structure of the AI's, I guess, brain? Did the researchers find any changes in how the AI organizes knowledge as a result of this distillation process?
that's a fantastic question, and it takes us to the concept of feature geometry,
Okay.
which is essentially about understanding how the AI organizes and represents knowledge internally.
Okay.
So you can almost think of it like looking at the structure of a library.
Okay, so like a well-organized library makes it easier to find information.
Exactly.
So we're talking about a well-organized AI brain being better at retrieving and processing information.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the researchers wanted to know if distillation somehow changes the organizational structure of the AI's knowledge,
Uh-huh.
making it more or less efficient at reasoning. And they use a technique called semantic parallelograms to explore this.
Semantic parallelograms. Okay, you've piqued my curiosity, so explain it to me like I'm 5.
Sure. So imagine you have two pairs of words, man and woman, and king and queen.
Okay.
And these pairs have an analogous relationship, right?
Right.
Now, in the AI's internal representation, these words are represented as vectors or points in this high dimensional space.
Okay.
And if the AI has learned good representations, the relationship between the vectors for man and woman
Uh-huh.
should be very similar to the relationship between king and queen.
Right.
And this forms a kind of parallelogram in that abstract
I think
space.
I'm starting to get it.
Okay,
So they're looking at these relationships to see if the AI understands like how different concepts are connected.
precisely.
Okay.
And the more accurately these relationships form parallelograms in the AI's internal representation, the better its feature geometry,
Okay.
which means it has a more structured and efficient way of organizing information.
Right.
And they measured this using a metric called parallelogram loss.
Okay.
Lower loss means better geometry, like a well-organized library.
Okay. So lower parallelogram loss is a good thing.
Exactly.
So what did they find when they compared the original models to the distilled ones? Did distillation mess up the AI's organizational system?
Well, the results were actually quite nuanced.
Okay.
They found that in smaller distilled models, the parallelogram loss was a bit higher
Okay.
than in the original models.
So it's like cramming all of your books onto a smaller bookshelf. Things might get a little disorganized.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
But here's the really interesting part. When they looked at larger distilled models,
Okay.
the parallelogram loss was actually lower than in the original model.
Wait, so you're telling me that bigger distilled models not only have those unique reasoning features,
Yeah,
but they might also have a better organized brain than their larger counterparts.
it seems counterintuitive, but that's what the research suggests.
Yeah.
It challenges this assumption that distillation always leads to a loss of structure,
Right.
and hints that under the right conditions, it might actually enhance the way AI represents and understands information.
Wow, this is this is blowing my mind. It's like these larger distilled models
Yeah,
are finding even more efficient ways to organize information
yeah,
than the original models they were trained on.
it's pretty remarkable.
So if that's the case, does that mean that distilled models are actually like smarter than their larger counterparts?
Well, smarter is a tricky word when it comes to AR.
Yeah, it is.
Intelligence is this complex concept, and we're still trying to figure out how to measure it accurately in these systems. But what we can say is that these findings really challenge our assumptions about what happens when we try to compress knowledge in AI.
This is all so fascinating. It sounds like this research is opening up a whole new chapter in our understanding of AI.
Yeah.
We've seen that distilled models can develop unique reasoning features.
Right.
They can be steered to think in specific ways,
Yeah.
and they might even have better organized brains than their larger counterparts.
Right.
So what's not to be excited about?
There's a lot to be excited about,
Yeah,
but there are also important questions to consider about the potential downsides of these advancements.
yeah.
We've already touched upon some of the ethical implications of being able to steer AI's reasoning and
Yeah, no, it's like we're stepping into a whole new world of possibilities, but also, a world with new risks and challenges.
exactly.
But before we get too deep into that, let's dive back into the specifics of the research.
Sure.
Did the researchers actually show examples of how these distilled models reason differently?
They did, and those examples are incredibly illuminating. They
Mhm.
really bring the research to life, and they did, and those examples are where it really clips. It brings the research to life.
Okay, I'm ready for that aha moment, so lay it on me.
Okay, so in one example, they gave the distilled model a simple math problem, something like, what's the next number in the sequence? One, two, three.
Okay, pretty straightforward. Did it ace the
It did, yeah, without any steering, it quickly identified the next number as 4.
Okay,
But then they decided to turn up the dial on those self-reflection features,
right.
the ones that make the AI more hesitant and prone to second guessing.
Oh, so I'm picturing like the AI having a total meltdown over this simple math problem.
Yeah.
Did it like freeze up?
Not exactly. It still arrived at the correct answer.
Okay.
But its thinking process went from this streamlined one-sentence response to this multi-paragraph saga filled with self-doubt and uncertainty.
So instead of just saying four, it
Right.
went on this whole existential journey about the nature of numbers.
Pretty much, yeah. It started questioning the very premise of the problem, exploring multiple interpretations of the sequence, going back and forth on its reasoning, and the researchers actually called this overthinking mode.
That's hilarious. They basically gave the AI an anxiety disorder over a math problem.
Yeah.
What about the other reasoning features? Did they try amplifying those too?
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
In another example, they gave the AI a more challenging problem involving solving a system of equations.
Okay, now we're talking, that sounds a lot more like my math homework.
Right.
How did the AI handle that?
Well, without any steering, the distilled model still managed to solve the problem correctly,
Okay.
but its thought process was a bit meandering.
Uh-huh.
It explored various approaches, double-checked its calculations, even repeated some steps.
So it's like a student who eventually gets the right answer, but takes the route.
Exactly. But
Okay.
then they activated those deductive reasoning features,
Right.
the ones that make the AI more logical and decisive.
Yeah.
And that's when things got really
I
interesting.
bet did it suddenly turn into like a mathematical genius?
Pretty much, yeah. The distill model became incredibly focused and efficient.
Uh-huh.
It zeroed in on the most relevant information, applied logical deductions swiftly, and arrived at the solution with remarkable clarity and confidence.
Wow, so it's like they unlocked the AI's inner math whiz.
Right.
Did they give this supercharged reasoning style a name?
They called it incisive thinking mode.
Incisive thinking mode. Okay.
And it really highlights the potential to fine-tune AI's cognitive abilities for specific tasks.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to design AI systems that excel at different types of thinking depending on the situation.
That's pretty incredible. We could have AI that's specialized for like creative writing or scientific discovery or even like, complex decision making. But it also makes you wonder about the potential downsides. Like if we can steer AI's reasoning, what's to stop someone from steering it in like harmful directions?
That's a crucial question and one that the AI research community is really grappling with right now.
Yeah, it is.
As we develop these increasingly powerful AI systems, it's essential that we do so responsibly and ethically.
Right.
We need to make sure that AI's reasoning abilities are used for good
Yeah.
and that we have safeguards in place to prevent misuse.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like we're giving AI the keys to the car, but we also need to make sure it knows the rules of the road.
Exactly.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're just at the beginning of an incredible journey into the world of AI.
Yeah,
And there's a lot to learn and explore along the way.
for sure.
But for now, let's wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating research on distilled reasoning models.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've seen how distilling large AI models isn't just about making them smaller, it's about shaping the very way they think.
Mhm.
We explored the surprising discovery of these unique reasoning features that emerge in these distilled models.
Right.
We discussed the mind-boggling possibility of actually steering those features to influence how AI approaches problems.
And we even touched upon some of the huge philosophical and ethical questions that arise when we start like tinkering with the minds of machines.
For sure, it's a really exciting time to be studying AI, and this research on distilled reasoning models is just one example of the groundbreaking work that's happening in the field.
Absolutely. And if you're as intrigued by this research as we are, we encourage you to check out the full paper
Hmm.
and delve deeper into the world of AI.
For sure.
And as always, keep those questions coming.
Yeah, your curiosity is what fuels our deep dives.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of knowledge.